Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you guys for watching this short film. It's funny because I was literally, as I was watching it, and this is the third time I've seen it actually, thinking to myself...
Getting those views up for me, thank you.
Well, yeah, exactly. Just, like. Thinking to myself, how weird it is sometimes that creatives in Hollywood, you come up with an idea, in this case 3 years ago, and all of a sudden it feels like wildly relevant in ways you never expected, and is in kind of conversation with the contemporary era also in ways that you're not really expecting. But this is something that began 3 years ago, and I want actually to begin by first just kind of getting some context for where you guys were, who you guys are, where you guys were back 3 years ago, and how this project actually germinated. And let's begin with James.
Yeah, I'm a producer and an executive. I currently run the production company at HYBE America. Previous to that, it originated with SB Projects, which is a company founded by Scooter Braun. Launched and spearheaded his production company, produced shows like Dave, which you might have saw on FX and Hulu, which just finished its third season, Neon on Netflix, a host of various films and shows, and just always very excited to work with brilliant creators and original voices. I just called you brilliant. I don't think I've ever done that.
Everyone here
in
is on
public.
my payroll.
Actually, no. I love working with him, and I come from a musician. I was a musician growing up. I always bonded and identified with artists, and I started a journey in entertainment that took me from a talent agency to being a music executive for television shows, oddly enough, to being a film executive at TriStar Pictures and working on things like Baby Driver before I got into the producing realm. And so it's a very kind of diversified field that I work in right now under HYBE, because everyone probably knows who BTS is. But I'm very much part of the U.S. operation and kind of running the production company side of things. So,
amazing. And we'll get back a little bit to where the intersection of music and filmed entertainment actually, in some ways, is relevant to this. But Ken, I wanted to ask you the same. Just share a little bit about yourself, and then also specifically where you were and what you were doing when you first came up with this idea.
Yeah, I mean, James and I have this in common. I actually, prior to working in the entertainment industry, I was working in music and in the digital side of things, and literally had like that very stereotypical proverbial quarter-life crisis. Always wanted to do that for a living, and so quit my job, packed my car, broke my parents' hearts, and moved to LA to be a writer. Had never written anything, like a moron. Probably should have tried, practiced, done literally anything before I made that decision, but I didn't. It worked out, luckily. But in the last 12 years, I've worked in television. I was TV writer, am a TV writer for since the beginning. Worked on shows on FX, Netflix, HBO, Amazon, and over the last few years I've been writing feature films for various studios. That's actually sort of like the majority of my career has been working for giant conglomerates. And so when this opportunity came about, thanks to this guy signing the checks, had to jump on it. I've always wanted to direct, and sort of as a working screenwriter with literally zero directing experience, the only way I'm going to be able to direct is if I write the screenplay or the script that project that comes with that project. So the idea came about, unsurprisingly, after COVID, during the pandemic. I think I was nearing like a high level of psychosis at the time, being locked in my house with my infant child and my wife, sharing a dining table as our workstations. And we had just finished the first reign of Voldemort, and so you can see probably a lot of the political satire elements running through that 15 minutes was a result of of those previous 4 years. And, it's ironic that you said that it's timely considering what just happened last week. But,
We really did not know that government control of reproduction was going to be quite so.
Yeah. But I was telling James this when we first talked about the idea. Like during the pandemic, my wife and I went down this rabbit hole of like, my wife and I had met prior to like apps and social media dating, and so we were just sort of imagining what things would be like had that been in play, and led us down this like rabbit hole of Reddit statistics of like how bad marriage rates are across the world and how low birth rates are now across the world. Like I think you mentioned Singapore has a program for that tries to matchmake lonely singles. Japan has something similar. All of this
it's already happening.
Yeah, it's already happening. Exactly right. It's already happening, and so it wasn't like a huge stretch to postulate what that might look like here.
Singapore's program is called SDU, which is the Social Development Unit. Except Singaporeans call it Single, Desperate, and Ugly. But it's a program to try to matchmake and encourage the birth rate, which in Singapore is, I believe, the second lowest in the world third maybe after Japan and Korea. So yes, it's a thing for sure.
Asia always leading the way.
But that relevance, even if it comes out of like diving into Reddit rabbit holes or maybe a little bit of connection to the cultural reality that being, sort of match made from the outside is not entirely alien to Asians to begin with, right?
No. Yeah, that was actually one of the key statistics that informed like the original seed of that idea was this notion that couples in arranged marriages report like much higher levels of long-term happiness and marital success than couples in choice-based marriages. So, and I think only like 4%, I think was the number of arranged marriages end in divorce. I mean, obviously there are cultural factors involved in that, but and like the stigmatization of divorce. But it was actually the notion that like couples in arranged marriages are happier 5, 10, 15 years later than like all the miserable people in relationships here.
We will always invent new ways to make ourselves miserable, even with something as lovely as love. But so, James, when Ken first pitched this idea to you, how did he actually deliver the idea, and what did you originally imagine that it would be? Because creating this short was probably not what you were planning originally, right? You were thinking this is going to be a feature film, or this is going to be maybe even a returnable series, but
it might still be.
And that's, well, hopefully. Someday, someday soon. But James, when you heard the pitch, I mean, we're sitting here in a Hollywood that's kind of in the throes of paralysis, and feature films in particular, and we were talking about this before, have always been a little, just a wild scenario where you're investing tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars of money against basically a single weekend, right? Which will determine the entire future potential revenues and profitability of the film itself. It's like, what other startup is going to invest that much money at that level of risk with that little amount of leeway and margin? And that's what kind of fascinates me about what ended up happening here. But I wanted to ask you, when did the idea of turning this into a short film, kind of a pilot of a pilot, if you will, occur?
And I apologize for coughing. I'm coming down from a cold. So.
We all lean over.
Sorry.
But yeah.
It was really, he had a TV iteration of this, and then we kind of put it on ice, and then he kind of reversioned it into this feature pitch, and I was like, he was so in command of his vision, and we live in this ecosystem where we're always deferring to the big paychecks, the big studios, and I've been playing that game for a long time. I've been in the buyer seat at Sony, I've been in the producer seat, I've made hit shows, I've sold a lot of development, have been rejected a lot, have had success, so I've lived it all. But this time I was like, I don't want to go through the rungs of 3 to 5 to 7 year development processes. How can we take the reins? How can we control it a little bit more? How can I put our money where our mouth is and kind of support filmmakers? I mean, I do a lot of panels and stuff like this. I'm talking about this all the time, but how about actually supporting it this time? Obviously, I don't have endless checkbooks, so I can't do it for every single person, but how can I be intentional about it and specific about it? And so when Ken had this pitch, he specifically kind of denoted it as, look, this could be a standalone short, and it could be a proof of concept for something bigger. And those 3 words, proof of concept, was huge for me because I was like, we live in an era of universes and IP and all that stuff. We don't usually think of something like this as the basis for something bigger and ancillary potential and all that stuff. I, oddly enough, saw that potential in this, and I was like, let's take the bet. And to make it Ken's feature debut was really important for me to support. The level of investment is not, if you're being smart and independently minded and scrappy, it's possible. You can get really talented people. I mean, Ken can describe
a lot of favors.
Yeah, a lot of favors, and and honestly, it sort of proved itself on the page because every actor who we went to, Jimmy, Donald, Jamie, you name it, Alexandra, Tim Simons from Veep. I mean, every single actor, they cleared enough time in their schedule to make way for this, and that to me was a bit validating. Like we had something. So the goal was always to make something bigger, but I'm also really glad that it's a standalone piece that really showcases his work as a writer and director. So. Checkbox for that one, but we are kind of figuring out how to do the bigger version, and happy about it so
Conversations
far.
ongoing.
Yeah, a lot of interest.
Yeah.
We've done a film festival run, and it's been great.
I mean, this is not an entirely unknown pathway, right? First of all, there has been a real evolution in kind of the way that shorter form narratives have worked, even in spaces like the music video, right? We talked about how, the characters and the situations that turned into Dave began with Lil Dicky and his music videos and kind of the long, the narratives that sort of bled into the longer form from there. We're seeing more and more people actually invest into music videos and other kinds of short form content enough to not just see a little bit of sizzle, but to build a world, right? And to see characters and situations that you can imagine are much larger. And the idea that doing a short film which is cost controllable, which allows you to actually see on the screen and not just on the page what's going on, and which can be done much faster than the production process of doing something like a development and production process of doing something like a feature film, is, it's kind of brilliant. And to that point of it having worked before, we discussed how Whiplash, right, began as a short film before, after its own festival run, becoming not just a feature film, but an acclaimed Oscar-winning feature film that created entire careers. So I wanted to actually, throw it back to you quickly, James, and then talk to you, Ken, about the creative choices involved.
No, as like a film exec at a buyer at Sony, I saw, you see the scripts, you see the pitches, and as a younger exec, you're always looking for, how can I define myself? How can I create a niche? And, I very quickly had this niche for being on the pulse of pop culture and music and having those relationships, et cetera, et cetera. But there was this other pocket that was kind of burgeoning. And when Chazelle's short came out, I was blown away. I mean, and I was a musician myself. I had that kind of rigorous. I had a J.K. Simmons in my life in my childhood, so there may have been more reasons why I felt connected. I'm doing okay. It's fine. But he turned that into something remarkable. And then I remember Fede Alvarez, who's a huge director now. Did the latest Alien movie and Evil Dead franchise. I mean, he made a name for himself with a short that he created for like $10,000 or something, maybe even less. And I always had that in the back of my head of like, how could I also do that and figure it out? And it hasn't been like a consistent model over the past, decade. It's really kind of few and far between. But I'm hoping something like this could actually set a precedent because it is really such a great calling card.
It's when you look at television, right? The idea of creating pilots has always been a part of the system of development, but feature film, less so. People expect it to jump off the page and immediately, sort of fully fledged into a vision on screen. This does feel a little bit like making a pilot for a movie. But in order to do so, you have to make certain choices. And I think there have been plenty of examples of people sort of shrinking a feature idea into a short and doing it really cheap, that sort of $10,000 way, right? The difference here is that this really does feel like
it costs more than $10,000.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I mean, cheap still. We're Asian, whatever. But
not that much more, but
but you had name talent on there,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you had the production quality of this felt like it was just a slice of standalone slice of what feels like a feature film. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the choices you need to make it still feel like a world, right?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, that's where having 10 years of experience working in television really comes in handy, especially working in comedy. It's a small community, frankly, in LA. You either know a lot of talent both in front of and behind the camera, or they're like 2 text messages away, which wasn't the case for half our cast. But as a screenwriter, like, this is my day job. It's weird to say that, but something like 80% of the success of my career or lack thereof is dependent on my ability to get in a room full of executives like this and explain in 15 to 20 minutes 2 seasons of a television show or 95 to 100 minutes of a feature film. And not just explain the idea and make it sound like something that is worth watching. I have to convince them of my competency, the fact that I'm not going to take $10 million or whatever it is of their money and flush it down the toilet. All of that I have to do, verbally in a room with executives with a producer by my side. So I thought, why not just show them? If I have something visual that I can sort of walk into a meeting hand in hand with, like my 15 to 20 minute explanation of the movie, and so that they can see, especially something like this. Like when I pitched this to James, this was the pitch. Imagine when Harry Met Sally meets Civil War. Like, that's not something you can quickly explain in 20 minutes. But if you have something like that to back up your pitch, your verbal pitch, I think that goes a long way towards helping, very risk-averse executives from, taking the next step and hopefully sort of like letting you progress. But in terms of like the creative piece, that's basically like the first 5 minutes of the movie, but with like added subplots. It's very intentionally designed, written, cut to play for executives, frankly. I'm not even embarrassed to say that. Like, this is for we made this for Hollywood executives to watch on a Wednesday afternoon after lunch. You know what I mean? Like, it has to move at a certain pace. It has to look competent. It has to look professional. It helps when, as James was saying, you can sign up so many really high-level, high-quality creatives, both in front of and behind the camera. Our DP, Seng Hao Yam, shoots for, he's shot so many commercials, music videos. He shot a couple movies. He comes from the same camp as like the Daniels and Hiro Murai. He's worked with some of the best in the business. And I sent him the script a long time ago, or last year, and he was in. But then we also can't waste people's time or his money.
Right.
We shot that thing in like 2 days and like 6 hours.
So I want to actually pivot to that, because part of what makes gathering those bold-faced names together, that talent together, possible is that you're only asking them to commit
Correct.
For a couple days.
Yeah.
And that in some ways is kind of the elegant, almost accidental reason why doing something like this short makes sense. And James, I wanted to ask you about what this looks like. I mean, we have a little bit of a sense of what the budget was, but what could this grow into, and how are you actually then, kind of taking it out to the next stage of development?
Yeah, I mean, the very simple thing is, you look at this. If we're going to be cold and calculating, it's IP that you sell. So it's like a short story, it's a script, it's a spec, it's a piece of art that you package and you bring out to the marketplace and say, hey, does someone want to option this? Does someone want to take over the chain of title? Obviously the economic arrangements can all be diversified. Maybe we'll get involved, but we as a company, we are not a consistent film financier. Otherwise, we would be having different conversations.
I'm trying to talk them into it, though.
He is pushing our model forward for sure. But yeah, that's kind of what it is, a film that's in the 5 figures, well made, looks good. How can we bring this out to the marketplace, make it look a little fresh, exciting, and standing out from the pack? Because it's, just as consumer habits are with entertainment, the internal pitching mechanism in Hollywood also very crowded and saturated. So how do we separate ourselves? Obviously we have a track record, and it's sort of come into salesman mode, like me with the trench coat coming in with like here are my wares, right? But that's essentially what it is. The most immediate path is how can we find the forward venture into a feature-length film and get that done. Now, I have sort of other notions of, could this be a book? Could you even do a graphic novel? Could you do a pod companion element? I think that all trickles down for me from the feature version of it. There's even a version of, there have been some people kind of tickling the ideas of, could this be a short film distributed in and of itself on some platform, which has happened from time to time. So, very flexible, but I think for the most immediate future, and by the way, I'm not discounting TV too. Like maybe there's kind of the TV version of it.
That was
as
like
well.
half a pilot you guys just watched.
Yeah, exactly. That's right, half a pilot. So, not to sound scattered, there is kind of like so many prongs to what this could become, in my opinion. But the most immediate specific step is using this as a piece of, hey, like, would you like to take this over? Would you like to buy it out? Would you like to option it? And let us develop the film with us as producers, him writing, directing, and let's see where we can take it.
I think what really strikes me about what you said there is, given the state of Hollywood, and again, that paralysis, that sense of fear that exists out there, people are so wedded to IP, to prior IP, as something that potentially is a de-risking, trait of a pitch or a proposal for development. When you don't have that, IP, because it's an original story, what you've done is you've created the prior IP now, right? And that's kind of brilliant.
But no shade to IP, by the way. That's where I can afford to do something like this because IP pays my bills elsewhere. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I would love to write a Transformers movie. You know what I mean? That's just like part of the business of working as a creative in Hollywood. Like, you have to take calculated risks and really pick your spots as to like what you're going to spend your time on.
Well, I'm going to end here because I know we've run out of time with a note about what calculated risks end up looking like. Like I said, you didn't imagine that you're going to be prophetic, right? And tell a story about kind of an America that had some sort of immense catastrophe and had to kind of rebuild itself, and in doing so, kind of have this wacky, neat, cute, romantic comedy set in this world where people are forced to reproduce. But the other thing that you did was, in casting Alexandra Shipp and Jimmy O Yang, you took a calculated risk that these two individuals could in fact be romantic leads. And given the fact that the character of Eugene Lee here, maybe a decade ago, even 5 years ago, a lot of people would say, hey, why do you have to take an Asian guy, a normal-looking Asian guy, make him into a guy who's mocked for being a virgin or not getting enough sex or whatever? You know what? In this day and age, when Jimmy O Yang is not only a romantic lead multiple times over, but is in fact an action hero and is headlining his own television series on Hulu,
Yep.
Interior Chinatown, coming out soon. It's amazing.
He
Please
sends
watch
his regrets for not being able to join, by the way.
it. He's here in spirit.
He's getting an award somewhere across town. Fucking.
Good planning, right?
good.
And that's what I'm trying to say. It's like by kind of taking smart, small risks, you guys have leaned into a space where things are just kind of coming up to make the next sales pitch you have a little bit more attractive, or maybe a lot more attractive, to whoever's in the room. So with that, thank you guys so much for being a part of this. Letting
Thanks,
us see
guys.
this. Thank you guys for joining and listening.
Thanks for watching.
Yes. And keep an eye for what happens next. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.